Marker. And action.
This is Behind the Bells, the show that takes you behind the magic of your favorite Christmas movies and shows. Within the background of every Santa Claus, reindeer, and stocking is a story. Where did it come from? Our Christmas movie expert will unravel all of that and give you the full story. Sit back and enjoy another episode with Robert Nicholas.
Merry Monday, everyone, and welcome to Behind the Bells. I'm your host, Robert Nicholas, and I'll be taking you on another one-horse open sleigh ride into the world of Christmas movies. In our previous editorial episodes, we've covered a variety of Nickelodeon shows. So far, we've tackled Doug, which is a personal favorite of mine, Rugrats, which I liked as a kid, but not so much as an adult, and Ren and Stimpy, which has a weird and abstract design that I both respect and like, even if it does have a dark background. Today's show ranks pretty high on my favorites list from Nickelodeon. This is Rocko's Modern Life.
Good as new. Rocko's Modern Life. Rocko's Modern Life. Rocko's Modern Life.
Keep your hands and arms inside the vehicle at all times. Let's go for a ride.
That was a hoot!
So, what would be the best way to describe Rocko's modern life? I'd say that if we were to take Ren and Stimpy's outrageous and chaotic tone, dial it back a little bit, and then add in the more slice-of-life elements from Doug and Rugrats, then presto, you'd get the kind of show that Rocko is. If it connects to Ren and Stimpy's style a lot, does that mean it's going to only appeal to a similar cult crowd? I'd say yes and no. It's complicated. Yes, Rocko's Modern Life does rely on plenty of gross-out jokes, and you can tell that the animators are having a lot of fun just to see how much they can get away with. There's a similar ploy with the writing, but I'll get to that. Unlike Ren and Stimpy that seems to exist primarily out of bad taste and to offend, Rocko never tries to go so far that it could alienate its audience. If anything, Rocko's ability to get away with a lot of jokes with more relatable slice-of-life elements makes it more of a crowd pleaser. It just so happens that it's a crowd pleaser that's allowed to go further. The other difference is that while Ren and Stimpy seems to exist in however reality it wants, Rocko does have a reoccurring set of anthropomorphic characters and an established setting. Within the town of O-Town, a 20-something wallaby named Rocko, played by Carlos Alazraqui, was trying to make the best out of his situation. He's a transplant from Australia who's both naive and a bit of a coward, but he's also upbeat and optimistic. Even on those worst days, he tries to find the silver lining. Regardless of his overbearing friends, dumb dog, horrible boss, and a whole world that seems to hate him, Rocko is rarely brought too far down. His only companions seem to be an obese steer named Heifer, played by Spongebob voice actor Tom Kenny, and a nervous wreck of a turtle named Filbert, played by Mr. Lawrence, who you may remember as Plankton, also from Spongebob. Both do seem to care for Rocko, but many episodes have shown them to be pretty bad friends. They've even had a story where Rocko won tickets to a wrestling match and yet could only take one of his friends. Cue Heifer and Filbert buttering up to him as much as possible. Yes, we've seen this kind of storyline done before, but something about Rocko made the situation more intense for a lead than the friends winning him over. Regardless, the two seem to be the only respite from the rest of the world. His toad neighbors Ed and Bev Bighead, both played by Charlie Adler, make Rocko's life a living hell. Ed is an older boomer, your typical grouchy old man who only wants peace and quiet, and making everyone else's life just as miserable as possible. Bev, while friendlier, seems to be very attracted to Rocko for some reason other than her being a very thirsty woman. There's even an official banned episode of Rocko called Leapfrogs. I won't go into full detail of the story, but given its title, I'll leave it up to your imagination on what it's probably about. But grumpy and flirty neighbors are the least of Rocko's concerned. Life seems to be enough of a chore. As I've said, Rocko's modern life takes more of a slice-of-life approach, even if its style hinges more on the strange and weird. Each episode is like a situation of the week scenario of Rocko trying to do something very simple. We've seen stories of him trying to go to the beach, the hospital, the grocery store, a baseball game, taking a road trip, and so on and so forth. On the surface, these seem to be like very ordinary things. But within this environment, it always seems like any of these could be hell. And it probably is. You can't tell me that you've never gone to a baseball game and have gotten really bad seats, or have gone to the beach and had to deal with the worst sunburn, or even having to stay in an awful motel while on the road. Rocko manages to take these real-life possibilities, inserts them into a cartoon world, and still somehow makes it feel real. I'd say that the reason it feels more real than something like Ren and Stimpy is within the writing. Ren and Stimpy could occasionally feel relatable, but that was always more focused on its shock. Rocko's jokes managed to make it very appealing to a wide audience. For children, the juvenile gags made it more naughty. Yeah, this would mean putting it into the same category as something like Garbage Pail Kids, Beavis and Butthead, and of course, Ren and Stimpy. For adults, not only would the situations still feel relatable, but they would catch a lot of jokes that they didn't know they could get away with. I'll play a clip of some of the adult jokes that I'm still surprised made it on TV, sometimes multiple times thanks to syndicated airing.
Thanks, big man. We've all been touched by your bigness.
Supple and firm. Good muscle tone. Youth. Cough, please.
Okay then. Oh baby, oh baby, oh baby. Rocko. Mrs. Bighead?
Sorry, we full up. Won't have room for another 20 minutes. Oh, we have premature departure. You can have room now. How long you want?
Just till tomorrow.
All night? Okay.
Let me be the first to welcome you aboard Chokey Chicken Incorporated.
Knock off the crying. That's not my grave.
Why don't you just jump on our doggy-style bow ride? Everybody on their hands and knees?
Yes, they definitely make that kind of a joke about seedy motels. What I found more funny though was just how little controversy this ever stirred up. Ren and Stimpy was infamous for the many things ranging from its style to just how much the whole thing was in bad taste. Rocko may have not as much to complain about, but I always wondered how this managed to get along with a lot of people. The best way I can answer is to talk about my own personal experience and opinion of the show. Unlike Ren and Stimpy, which was like forbidden fruit, my parents never had any kind of issue with Rocko. That was probably because of a number of factors. First, it primarily aired in the evening and in the late mornings on the weekends, and my folks probably would have not seen much of it. 2, if they did see it, they only caught glimpses and thought they saw something that was much more tame. They would have been kind of right and kind of wrong. I also had kind of an interesting opposite effect on Rocko. With Ren and Stimpy, I didn't see much of it as a child, so I watched more of it as an adult. With Rocko, I saw plenty of it as a kid, not so much as an adult. It's not that I wouldn't return to it, it just so happens that I watched it enough to have already seen most of the show by the time it ended. As you can tell, I really liked it, and I still do to this day. Rocko, to me, is exactly what a Nickelodeon cartoon needs to be. Yes, it was absurd and cartoony, but it never strayed too far into the territory of being quote-unquote too weird. Ren and Stimpy would do that a lot, but it would be a while before I understood that was intentional. Rocko was clearly made not as an artist project to simply accept or deny, but as something for an audience as a whole to enjoy. Maybe that's why it continues to have a large cult following today, despite only running around 52 episodes. The few that were made were just enough to craft a variety of fun ideas without running too long. With myself, I did everything I could to be on the lookout for whenever it would air. Because of its time slot, it may have been an issue for my parents, but it was never for me. I still recall a lot of times sitting in my room with the TV, waiting for an ad to say that it was coming soon. Something like this.
Next on Nick, it's Rocko's Modern Life, followed by Clarissa Explains It All.
Whenever that would be the case, I was always excited, regardless of what episode it was going to be. I knew that even if it was a lesser episode, I was still going to be acting out some of the animated movements or repeat the jokes to my friends in school. This might have gotten me into trouble more times than I'd like to admit, but as far as I was concerned, this always made me a favorite of everyone else who saw the show. So, what about the Christmas episode? I'll go into that in a little bit, but let's talk about where Rocko's Modern Life came from. The deranged masterpiece that was Rocko came from the mind of Joe Murray. Joe was an artist from an early age out of Northern California who at 16 had decided he wanted to get into animation. He ranged from doing Jimmy Carter political cartoons to his own personal short films like The Chore. And this was all done while he was still attending college. By 20, still in school, he had even started up his own company, Joe Murray Studios. He also had an unpublished comic called Travis. The only reason I bring that up is because the first design for Rocko would come from here. In fact, if you look into his earliest work, including a short film called My Dog Zero, you'd see that much of the design for Rocko's Modern Life would come from here. The walking, talking animals, the various use of colors on characters, and the more abstract shaped structures. Before My Dog Zero, he hoped to get more funding for it by selling the TV rights. In my previous episodes on the other Nicktoons, I mentioned that the channel was taking in a variety of pictures. This is how it managed to get shows that were very different from what Hanna-Barbera or Filmation had done before. Even though Joe was reluctant about doing a TV show, he did get the message that Nickelodeon would let him do whatever he wants, and this was after he warned them that he did not write for children. Nickelodeon decided that My Dog Zero wouldn't work as a series, but liked his design work enough to ask for something else. He would take his Rocko character from his Travis comic, further develop the idea of a wallaby unaware of the chaos surrounding him, and made that the show concept. Nickelodeon approved of the idea, and Joe was then assigned to craft a pilot. Production would begin in January of 1993. Though he had written the script for Sucker for the Suck-O-Matic as the first episode, he would end up producing Trash-O Madness as the pilot. Side note, before the production of Rocko's Modern Life, Nickelodeon didn't have the budget for producing its own animation. So for Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy, they had relied on the content creators to animate their own shows, with Nickelodeon primarily distributing it. For the showrunners, this was the closest in which they had 100% say in all aspects of it. This was also a fresh breath of air, as the industry of animation was coming out of a dark period. This all changed when John Kricfalusi was fired from Ren and Stimpy. His tyrant-like behavior and failure to deliver episodes on time had stunned the network, and thus decided to rein in on creative power. This would lead Nickelodeon into starting up their own in-house animation studio, Games Animation. Rocko's Modern Life would become the first in-house production. End side note. Trash-O Madness tested very well, and the network gave the green light for a season run. According to Joe Murray, even with the studio working with Games Animation, his crew were still allowed a lot of creative freedom. Joe Murray had no experience in working on a television show. This led to the voice actors acting on stage before recording their lines. This also led to a very loose atmosphere. This also led to many of the older experienced animators commemorating the studio for being more relaxed and open to various ideas. Everyone compared the production of that to Termite Terrace, the studio Warners who did the Looney Tunes shorts from the 30s. If you watch any episode of Rocko, you can definitely get a lot of the Looney Tunes vibe if it went just a little further with its jokes. It's also apparent that within the animation style, it features the same stretch and squash technique that allows for plenty of physical mayhem. Hurt them, bash them, break them, and yet everything would still move forward. The show would run for a couple of seasons, with Steven Hillenburg taking over the creative direction after season 3. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he would end up creating Spongebob in a few years. There seems to be a lot of Spongebob connections to Rocko. That's probably why a lot of people would end up seeing Spongebob as the spiritual successor to the latter. Even with the change in showrunners, Joe would continue working on Rocko until its end in 1996, with the last aired episode being the Thanksgiving story. Joe Murray has stated many times that Future Schlock is the true ending. This was the result of the network mixing up the production codes. This would make more sense when we jump ahead to 2019, when Netflix would air its revival special, Static Clean, but I'll go into detail about that later. So, what about its Christmas special? Rocko's Modern Christmas would air in the show's second season in 1994. It also happened to be the only new Christmas special to air that year.
This holiday, Rocko's wishing for some Christmas cheer. All he needs is a little snow. A big turnout for his party. I will ruin Rocko's party. And maybe an elf or two.
You must know where to find Christmas cheer.
What do you mean? Will Rocko get his Christmas wish?
This is going to be the best Christmas ever.
Find out on the world premiere special, Rocko's Modern Christmas, Thursday at 7:30, 6:30 Central, only on Nickelodeon.
So, what's the story? We begin on what's looking to be a very bleak day with no snow on the ground and gray skies. Don't get your hopes up that it's just a snowstorm coming, because it never does. Not that the clouds don't want to, it just so happens that the one cloud trying to get some snow on the ground is a little constipated. Put that visual image in your head, and it's probably not as funny Rocko's Modern Life makes it out. Rocko heads outside in complete winter gear with his sled to pretty much stand around and hope for the best. He looks up to see if the constipated cloud can get out anything, just only to fart out a single snowflake, which knocks out Rocko. We then get the title sequence, since this episode does not open with the traditional theme song. Along with Rocko's Modern Christmas, we also get a second title, Can't Squeeze Cheer from a Cheese Log. Why the two titles, and why something that random? Just because. It may be Rocko riding on a sleigh with Spunky pulling him, but we also get into his subconscious, as this is what he really wants for the holidays, a Merry Christmas. This of course is ironic given that he's from Australia, as it would be their summertime and not winter. This must make things more miserable, as he was expecting snow. Once Rocko regains his composure, he asks himself where the Christmas spirit is on that Christmas Eve. He brings up a good question, as none of the houses around him are decorated in any capacity. The one exception are some new neighbors that are moving in across from him. We don't see him quite yet, but out of the moving truck are plenty of Christmas decorations. Rocko is determined to bring in his own holiday joy. He decides to give his friends a call to see if they want to come over to spread some Christmas cheer. We can see on Heifer's end the rest of his family, his wolf family. It's an odd story, but Heifer, a steer, was adopted by a wolf family, and they live like any other suburban home. We also see that the family is trying to get a bunch done before Christmas comes. Once they hear about Heifer being invited over, they mistakenly assume that they are all invited. In fact, just to highlight more of the tone of the show, here is a clip of that all going down.
Yeah, what?
Happy Christmas, Grandpa.
It's your beaver friend. Hey, Rocko.
I need the scissors!
Hi, Heifer. How'd you like to come over tonight for a little holiday get-together? You know, make some Christmas cheer? Just you, me, and Filbert?
Heifer, get your butt off the phone and help your mother.
What time? About 8.
Hey, Mom, can I go over to Rocko's for a party tonight?
Party? How delightful!
Party? Well then, heck with this.
Heifer?
What time, Rockwell?
8 o'clock.
Lovely. See you then, dear.
I'll see you tonight, Rocko. I gotta go.
Heifer's bringing his family.
Rocko then makes the call to Filbert, who then calls his girlfriend, who ends up calling another friend, creating a chain reaction of more people planning on coming to the party. It's here you can get a glimpse of many of the secondary characters, like a human foot with a face named Gordon, Gladys the Hippo Lady, and local superhero Really Really Big Man. Once Rocko gets the understanding, he simply decides to invite the whole town just so that no one's feelings are hurt. Next door, Ed Bighead is overjoyed to see that the snow still hasn't fallen, if it ever does. He even takes more joy out of it since it hasn't snowed in O-Town for years. It only makes it much more miserable for everyone else. Yes, Ed is our Grinch of this Christmas story. Though, unlike the Grinch whose heart is 2 sizes too small, Ed simply likes being a troll. Everyone's misery is his pleasure. His wife Bev, however, seems to be more excited for the holidays, mailing out some cards. She also reminds him to close his bathrobe. I have to give credit in which while Rocko is making his invitation delivery, the snow cloud above his house takes another shot of prune juice to try to release something. Anything. This is also when Rocko finally gets a glimpse of his neighbors, a pack of elves, or at least one of them. This cute yellow elf is peeking behind the mailbox, in which Rocko has no other reaction other than just saying hi. As far as I remember, this elf didn't have a name, so I'm just gonna call him Yellow. He follows Rocko into the mall, in which we get just a little more Christmas chaos. We first see Rocko getting a tree. The tree lot is being run by Heifer and Filbert, in which quite randomly have gone from resting in their homes to being high-pressure salespeople. Their selection really isn't that impressive. One is a living Christmas tree, one is a cactus, and one is an upside-down Buckingham Palace guard dead in a bucket. Don't bother asking. Rocko gets the only real tree and is told, "Thank you for shopping at Pine Palace." And aloha! Again, don't think too hard, it's a cartoon. The mall itself is probably the best showcase of the holiday stress. We see everyone moving in a conveyor belt-like fashion, trying to get the last of the needed shopping in. The mall, at least in the 1990s, was one of the worst places to be on Christmas Eve. And on top of that, Rocko's dog Spunky wants to wait in line to see Santa, only to told no because of the long wait. Well, I should rephrase that. It's not Santa everyone's going to see, but rather Fruitcake Man. I have no clue what that is, but we need that somehow in our own American holiday tradition.
Bring the children to Fruitcake Man. I love the children. Go on, take a gift. I feel nothing. No. As Rocko was getting some needed groceries and party supplies, Yellow, the elf, wanders into a shoe store where he's being harassed by the alligator salespeople. They start messing with him as bullies do, that is until Rocko comes in to save him. They manage to get out of the mall where Rocko decides to take him home where he belongs. We're going to take a short break, but we'll see what happens when Rocko meets the other elves.
Love, family, traditions, presents, pumpkins, fireworks, Santa Claus. All make you think of holidays, right? Well, what about murder, heartbreak, gangsters, and witchcraft? Still thinking about holidays? Beginning this February, I will take you on a journey to the lesser-known sides of the holidays, the sides history might try to forget, the celebrations that you might not be familiar with. Oh, and don't worry, I'll be sprinkling in some elements of normal holiday traditions too. After all, even those of us with the dark side still have a special place in our hearts for the Easter Bunny, Valentine's candy, cute jack-o'-lanterns and ghosts, and of course, all things merry and bright. Let's uncover and celebrate the strange and unusual together. I'm your host, Kristen, and this is Holidays After Dark.
And now back to the show with our Christmas movie expert, Robert Nicholas.
Rocko brings Yellow back to the house that was being moved into. It's all decked out to the holidays and looks like it's full of cheer. After knocking, Rocko is greeted by an older elf, though he has the voice of a nonchalant 20-year-old whose vague nature makes it even more weird. He recognizes Yellow and invites Rocko in as a thank you. This is where we get one of only 2 appearances of Santa. Sort of. Rather than a jolly human being, he's a laser-fueled robot that looks more like a war machine than a gift giver. So perhaps it's the elves showcasing that they do most of the hard work, and it doesn't even stop with Santa. Or perhaps I'm reading too much into it. After all, there's already both Santa and Fruitcake Man. We're introduced to the other elves through a song, of course. That is, if we can even call it a song.
This is great having elves in the neighborhood. You must know where to find Christmas cheer.
What do you mean?
Well, my idea of a great Christmas is... Oh, thank you. Christmas to me is everyone forgetting the differences and coming together, singing and laughing, celebrating the spirit of the season. You know, Christmas cheer.
You mean cookies and presents and decorations?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Maybe you'd like to meet some of the gang.
Why, yes, I'd love to.
Sound off!
Wrench.
Boss!
Screwdriver.
Nail gun.
Claw hammer! Drill!
Crowbar.
Jigsaw.
Mango.
Mango?
I was feeling fruity.
Oh.
You know, screwdriver, nail gun, crowbar, and a jigsaw. But do you recall the most famous elf of all?
No, I don't.
That'd be Mitch. He had 3 legs and was the last elf who could make it snow.
Oh, I'd love for it to snow.
Yeah, well, we lost him in a blizzard.
With Rocko inviting the town, he also invites the elves, in which they accept. This would put anyone under pressure with the size of the party, but Rocko seems more than happy that he's just about to get the Christmas he's been wanting. However, as Rocko leaves, Ed Bighead sees the elves and seems somewhat bigoted towards them. There seems to be little reason for that since everyone else is a walking, talking animal, so who's to say elves can't exist in this kind of world? Still, Ed tells his wife to go to the Christmas party with the Christmas weirdos and freaks. The only other clue we get of Ed's hatred of the holidays is when he says they never get invited to any parties. That's probably the real reason, but when Ed gets an idea, he creepily takes a lot of joy in it. What happens is that Filbert is walking around and Ed tells him that not only are elves coming to the party, but knowing that this turtle is a hypochondriac, claims that elves carry foot fungi. This enough causes Filbert to break out in hives and repeat his catchphrase, "I'm nauseous, I'm nauseous, I'm nauseous, I'm nauseous." In a repeat of the earlier telephone montage, He phones his girlfriend to say he's not going. He too seems to have some disgust towards the elves and says he won't go for that other reason. We then get another sequence of more calls until the elves themselves get the call, but by this time, the rumor has gone from elves with foot fungi to a gang of criminally diseased trolls, so they too opt out. This causes little Yellow to shed a single tear. I will also note that the tree is eventually delivered to Rocko's, but it's so big that it can't even fit inside the house. So only part of the bottom is even in the living room, with the rest sticking out of the window at an angle. I'd love to see if anyone has ever had to do this. Not that I see someone, dumb enough to do that, but there's always got to be that one someone that didn't think about the consequences and resorted to tilting a tree to solve the dilemma. By the time Rocko is finally ready for the party, we get what has to be, the most warm and Christmas looking sequence of the entire episode. The decorations are up, the food is laid out, and the bottom of the tree is ready to go. It's still deranged, but the music in the background makes it really nice. Let's play the clip and you try telling me that you don't get the same warm feeling.
Well, everything's perfect. Pretty soon our house will be filled with people laughing, singing Christmas carols. And maybe if we're lucky, we'll find some Christmas cheer.
Of course, the only problem is that no one shows up. The rumor definitely got to everyone, and it seems that no one wants to meet the elves. Not even Heifer, Rocko's best friend, shows up, but he's kind of an exception to this. He didn't get scared off by the elves, but was just so caught up in selling Christmas trees to even remember about the party. When we cut to see what's happened, Heifer is in a hula skirt, frozen from the cold as he's trying to get rid of the one cactus still for sale. That means that someone did buy the dead Buckingham Palace guard as their decoration. By the time midnight comes, Rocko is ready to call it quits. He even tries to phone his family in Australia, only to be turned away because the lines are busy. He does, however, get a visitor, Yellow the elf. Rocko invites him in, where he's asked to read the story of 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. This also happens to be one of the few things from our world that is read without any kind of animated punchline. That's because since the original poem is so old, it's in the public domain. I appreciate the more sentimental moment of Rocko trying to make a happy Christmas for this little elf, but I'd be lying if I thought they could have, done something different. Like Rocko reading a different version of it, or maybe even a deranged version of the story unfolding in the elf's imagination. At least something to make the idea match the rest of the world. Rocko ends up falling asleep as he gets to the end of the story. With nothing better to do, Yellow the elf steps outside to look at the cloud, having given up trying to snow. The little guy tries waving some fingers, with nothing happening. But when he starts to remember how nice Rocko has been, a little Christmas magic finally happens when a little heart pops out of the elf and up into the cloud. This definitely awakens it. The cloud's tummy rumbles and rocks, and it finally snows to the Hallelujah chorus. Christmas morning comes, along with the rest of the town and a news crew. This is because while the rest of the town is bone dry, Rocko's house got a fresh snowfall, looking just as majestic as the Christmas morning Ralphie woke up to in A Christmas Story. Everyone is clearly in awe as the first snow in years was restricted to this Wallabee's house. The elves come out to see everything and seem just as surprised. But that's not all. They even get a visit from Mitch. Yes, the same three-legged elf who was thought lost in a snowstorm. He explains that he left the group and went into seclusion because the Christmas spirit has been gone and everyone needed a reminder. Since he was also the only elf who could make it snow, the other elves seemed surprised that Yellow was able to pull it off. Rocko eventually wakes up to see the madness going on outside and heads out. Here he finally sees the entire town
including the Big Head's son Ralph and the Grim Reaper, who happens to be named Peaches. Heifer and Filbert even apologize for both not showing up and spreading the rumor. This is clearly the kind of Christmas Rocko's been looking for. He then decides to have the party that morning instead and invites everyone in. That is, everyone except Ed Bighead. Rocko probably would have invited him, but Ed's still spiteful that the town got a nice Christmas anyway. Ed then gets a visit from Yellow, who asks something for him, an invitation to the Christmas party. The addition of the stickers indicating he went all over the world is even a nice subtle element. This seems to have gotten to Ed, who seems touched himself. He, however, gets a second gift, a hammer to the legs for starting the rumor in the first place. This leads to a chase that eventually leads him to the party. Rocko's house is now in the complete opposite that it was last night. Instead of emptiness and simple decorations, it's full of people, or animals that have come together to celebrate the spirit of the season. Rocko even gets a last-minute phone call from his parents, who wanted to wish him a Merry Christmas. This party seems to be spreading so much love that several hearts start rising up into the clouds, which starts a snowfall on the rest of the town. The end credits roll as we continue to see the rest of the neighborhood getting a fresh blanket of snow, crafting a nice image to end on, or so you think. The last thing we see is everyone the next morning tossing out the Christmas decorations with the garbage. While this can be seen on regular TV airings in the DVD release, for some reason the scene is missing from the Paramount Plus streaming service. It might be an oversight, but I hate missing scenes. It at least adds to the show's tone rather than just ending at the snowfall. Rocko's Modern Christmas may seem like a holiday special that's dangerously close to falling into the tropes that make it too sentimental. A main character who wants more Christmas cheer, a Grinch who wants to ruin everything, love eventually solving the problem. The good news is that it feels like the warmer moments are earned rather than forced. Rocko's Modern Life is certainly doing a Christmas story, but it's unashamed by its tone. It still manages to be cruel and give Rocko a win. It still has the funny sound effects that made me laugh as a kid, and still does as an adult. Even its animation still comes off as offbeat. So in a way, we along with Rocko want to see something Christmassy and warm out of this situation. There's always something positive to be found within the chaos. Those that find the idea of Stimpy finding his fart too gross and stupid just might find something a little more palatable with Rocko. It already appealed to me because it drew a limit on its bad taste. It also never sold itself primarily on the gross-out gags that Ren and Stimpy was proud of. If Rugrats was considered a little too close to home and wanted something that took more advantage of the animated possibilities, then you can tell that Rocko was proud of that aspect. As with Doug, a lot of specials are going to seem better than a story about a dog being rescued from his death sentence. After the 4th season, Joe Murray decided to leave the show, encouraging Nickelodeon to continue if they wanted. The network did not take up on that offer. Rocko's Modern Life ended with 52 episodes with exactly 100 sequences where they would continue to air reruns well into the early 2000s. I remember seeing it pop up during the Nicktoons You Pick show where kids could vote on the show to air. Rocko was sadly rarely picked. A good chunk of the crew, including Steven Hillenburg, Tom Kenny, and Mr. Lawrence, would move on to the show that's considered the successor to Rocko, SpongeBob SquarePants. That show served as two things. It was one of the last classic Nicktoons from my childhood. It would also change the way Nickelodeon marketed itself due to its enormous success. That's a story for another day, as I eventually do want to get to the multiple holiday episodes of SpongeBob in the not too distant future. So, what about Rocko's creator, Joe Murray? He took a break from animation to write some books, including a children's story, Who Asked the Moon to Dinner?
He would return to television in 2005, though not to Nickelodeon. He would make Cartoon Network his home with Camp Lazlo. I've never seen that show, but based on the images, it looks like a lot of Rocko's style would carry over. Currently, he has another show on PBS called Let's Go Luna. Again, I haven't seen it, but it looks cute. This, however, isn't the end for Rocko. In 2019, 90s babies and fans of the show were surprised when a new special was commissioned, Rocko's Modern Life, Static Clean. This new 45-minute episode brought back most of the crew and cast to see how Rocko would deal with the 21st century. If you know the character, then you know that it won't go well. I saw this back when it was released and thought it was a nice follow-up to the series, and without spoiling anything, has a lot to say about rebooting a show for a modern era. Do you do the exact same thing, or try to offer something different? This special would launch not on Nickelodeon, but rather Netflix, where it can still be seen today. I assume this is because the network knew that it wouldn't be kids as the majority seeing this, but rather the adult fans who grew up on it. Now, how often do I return to it? Chances are, if I feel like watching a Nickelodeon cartoon, then Rocko will probably be the first choice. This is what I imagine when someone needs to describe a perfect Nicktoon. The right blend of surreal and slice of life without talking down. I'm happy to see that the style and writing still holds up incredibly well. This is definitely a show I'd consider showing my children once they were ready for it. Rocko's Modern Life operated on 2 levels. On the first level as a kid, I laughed at the style, funny voices, and a joke or two. The second level comes as an adult, where the more down-to-earth ideas are very relatable. It seems like the crew wanted to warn children that the adult world is no easier than a kid's world. I mean, if anything, it's harder, chaotic, and even unfair. The best way to sum up is to say, any day is a dangerous day.
Thank you for joining us on this sleigh ride into the magical world of Christmas movies. Check us out for weekly rides into your favorite Christmas classics and their histories. Be sure to give us a positive review on iTunes if you like what you heard. And don't forget to follow us on social media on Facebook and Instagram for updates and special news. Consider subscribing on Patreon in order to help keep the show going and to gain access to some special gifts not available to the public. Merry Monday to all, and to all a good night. See you next week.
Cut. Okay, everybody, that's a wrap.